Well, I just wanted to sort of summarize some of my thoughts and other people's sharings on the events last week in Charleston. It's been almost a week, hard to believe. And I also wanted to tie this talk in with what I've been sharing about the factors that may stimulate destructive emotions and negative actions, the factors in our environment and within our own minds. And similarly, there are factors that stimulate our virtuous actions and our virtuous emotions as well. And I think that the folks in Charleston have been sort of embodying some of those factors. So I do, and this is just kind of my thinking out loud, is that for having the seeds through spiritual practice, that they have these seeds within their own minds, although unmanifest, love, compassion, forgiveness, understanding, and that when certain situations in their lives trigger them, instead of triggering hatred and revenge, they triggered forgiveness and compassion and love. As far as what type of outside influences via media, I would have to assume, because they were doing a Bible study that night, that they're very, very discerning on what type of written material, what type of external verbal and media stimuli they bring into their minds so that it can continue to feed those seeds of virtue. And the one that is extremely important that I think sometimes we minimize or don't realize is that who we have as friends. And so that community at the Emmanuel AME Church and in Charleston at large, it seems like they really cultivated a very close spiritual friendship within the congregation and perhaps in the larger community, so that they're positively influencing each other as far as creating virtue and really practicing together to cultivate their love and compassion. So we not only have the factors that stimulate the disturbing emotions and actions in our lives, but we also have factors that, those very same factors, when used with some kind of wisdom and discernment, can help us to cultivate and grow our virtuous emotions and our virtuous actions. So I think that they've really kind of embodied that this past week in the way that they've been holding themselves, holding each other, holding their families, holding the perpetrator, that they are using their virtuous training and their spiritual practice to their advantage. And then the second thing, kind of carrying on or segue into that, not only here at the Abbey do we have a spiritual community of Dharma friends, but we have been having a meditation class at the Unitarian Church in Spokane for the past 5 years, using a lot of the Buddha's teachings and principles to share with this community. Some of them are Buddhists, some of them are Unitarians, some of them have no particular religious background, but they're spiritual seekers of some sort. And so last night, as we've done with a number of previous tragic events or unfoldings in the world, that we kind of come together and just spend the evening processing and debriefing. And so last night we spent most of the evening just talking about what people's original responses were to the event and how they use the meditations that we've been doing together for the past few years, and particularly with Venerable's book with Russell Cult's this year, The Open-Hearted Life, on how to cultivate compassion, how they've been using it to work with their minds, how to see the perpetrator, how to see the families, how to support them from all the way across the country. And it was really quite inspiring. There was a lot of tenderness, there was a lot of rawness, but there was also this very tender open-heartedness as people were trying to, first of all, being extremely inspired by the folks in Charleston and how they're working with their minds and really taking this whole tragedy onto their path to cultivate and grow their great compassion and their forgiveness, and also realizing that it's a little bit harder and it's a little bit bigger step is to realize that this young man, because right now we're doing the 7-point cause and effect and equalize and exchanging self and others, a way to generate bodhicitta, and last night it was equalize and exchanging self and others, and to see that the fundamental truth within Every living being's mind is just like me. They want to be happy and not suffer. And how many times, first of all, we are totally confused about how to go about doing that. And that I think that's quite embodied by Dylan Roof. I'm sure he was looking for happiness and trying to stop some kind of suffering, and this is what he thought would do it. And to also realize that as much as we go looking for happiness and trying to find the alleviation of suffering outside ourselves, that a lot of times we simply are unable to do that. And so then the spiritual practice then comes back to, if we want to be happy and to alleviate our own suffering, we've got to come back to knowing that we are the ones who are basically the creators of the cause and conditions to bring that about. So people were kind of sitting with the remarkable practice of the people in Charleston, looking at things a little bit differently. I mean, I think the sadness of it was that a lot of people's first response was, here we go again. You know, this fundamental thing that this is something that has been stewing and steaming and fueling and torched for, well, since before the Civil War. But that these events happen, we rise to the occasion, we get inspired, we get moved, and then we go back to our distracted worldly lives. So there were a number of people in the group last night that said, we've got to do something, you know, not minds that are angry, not minds that are frustrated, minds that want to retaliate, but we've got to come together as a American family to say, you know, we've got to talk to the powers that be, we've got to work on our own minds, we've got to support each other, but this can't go on. We can't keep saying, oh, here we go again, or yet another, you know, terrorist attack, or yet another mass murder, or yet another somebody out of control with an unlicensed gun, too young, not fit to have one, you know, so we've got to, you know, so we had a lot of people saying, what can we do about this? We don't want it to be, here we go again. And so what type of social action, what type of spiritual practice, what type of support we can give each other to be able to have this stop, be done with. And as an American family, to stop creating the causes and conditions for this kind of suffering. You know, we were having a talk today before lunch, James and I saying, we're far too distracted to care. You know, how bad does it have to get before we unite as an American family to say, we're done with this. We're done with this violence. We're done with this irresponsible legislation that doesn't keep the guns out of everybody's hands who don't need one. And to be able to how do we support the young people of this country that have these difficult mental states, or just people in general in this country, the mental health system, how do we support these folks? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can address, but to not give up on each other, to know that there's always hope. As we could see in Charleston, there's a remarkable capacity of the human mind and heart to really, to sort of just stand up and look at something like this square in the face and say, I'm not going to go there. I am going to choose forgiveness and compassion, and how that ripples out into not only our country, but across the world as a source of inspiration, a source of hope, a source of saying something, a community of a small city in America can change the minds or bring people in the world a different way of perceiving something, you know, with a big mind and a big heart, because hate doesn't work, revenge doesn't work, forgiveness does work, compassion does work. Maybe not in the short term, because with the Buddhist worldview, we're looking at a very, very long-term aspiration for us to have harmony and peace in our world. But it starts like these kind of events and these kind of responses. And so last night we were able to come together as spiritual friends. Not everybody agreed with what had to happen and how they were feeling, but without judgment, without bias, without trying to fix anybody, to be able to bring and to share our deepest emotions, to be able to articulate how our practice does help us to transform our minds. And then on a practical level and on a practice level, what we can do as individuals and as a community to help facilitate some sort of dialogue and some sort of change for the greater good, not just for this country, but for all living beings as well. So it was really quite a lovely evening of process, and still inspired and still hopeful. So let's really keep that hope and inspiration in our hearts as we move forward.